Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Darkstone Dossiers with your host, Anthony Darkstone.
Greetings and welcome. Buonasera a tutti. Bonne nuit, buenas noches, bonsoir, guten Abend, all you wonderful people in the evening time, and a very good afternoon and good morning to you, wherever you may be on the planet in your afternoon or morning time. Just a couple of very fast announcements before we get on with our wonderful guest today. And the announcements are as follows. For those of you who are attending for the first time, we have, the usual Vegas style after a show, a thing called meet and greet, where after the show, you get to speak directly to my guest. I believe I have covered all that I need to say in the way of announcements. So welcome. I see a lot of dear pals here that have shown up. How wonderful. Thank you very much. A legendary pal of mine from Las Vegas, the one and only Frank Zach, and a number of other people from our International Assembly. What is that? Well, that is the, as the name implies, International Assembly arm of the Society of American Magicians. You don't have to be an American to join. We have members from all over the place. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, normally on the Darkstone Dossiers, most of you attendees will know, we run a little clip of about 2 or 3 minutes and then introduce my guest. I'm going to deviate a little bit. And the reason for that is, as producer and host, I had an enormous problem trying to choose one clip. I really did, because it's impossible to do that with my guest. Just one clip? No way. We're going to run in no particular order a couple of stills, which I'd like you to look at. They'll be on for a few seconds each. And then my guest will, to use an old cliche, wax lyrical and share wonderful history with us. So whenever we're ready, let's pull up the first still. And I'll just talk over them a little bit. There's some gentlemen I think you can spot. Next to Max Maven with his cup of coffee orange juice is my guest being looked at from a painting by another gentleman. Well, I think you know who that is. I think we have another one with Darren. I don't know who that young fella is with a glass of wine, but I'm pretty sure the professor is quite happy to be standing next to him. That is particularly interesting because I was very honored myself to lecture in Singapore when I was doing a gig over there for Singapore Ring 115, which is presided over by a wonderful gentleman called John Tew, who is just an amazing man. And he written some wonderful books on magic and the creative process, and is also a member of our International Assembly. Okay, let's see what we can do. Pick up the other one. Haha, this is from Dear Gary Plance's collection. This is, of course, the one and only Charlie Miller, for those who don't know. And next one, what do we got? Oh, I mentioned dear Daryl Rose, great friend, chairman of the Monday Night Committee at the Magic Circle, having fun with Howard, worked with Daryl in London and, you know, on the gig, etc. Juan Tamares, yes, an itinerant violin player. Those of you who get it, those of you who don't, doesn't matter really. What's the next one? Well, what can I say? Yeah. The legendary Mr. Tom Mulliker. I mean, just great. Blessings for his memory. And this man, absolutely, I loved him. If you really don't know who he is, I don't know what to say. Blessings for his memory. He was a dear friend and a wonderful mentor to me and many others. Then I go a good buddy of mine from Vegas, Paul Vigil, leaning over the couch. Dear Johnny, of course, who's also gone. Blessing for his memory. And Howard, and who all else? Let's see. Have we got more? I think we may have 1 or 2 more. Well, the show's about magic history. Well, blessings for Obi's memory. I have no idea what happened to his whistle, but those of you who know what this is about. It's a convention you cannot attend or participate unless you're invited. It's that simple. Oh, this is interesting, because you all know Magic Circle. Howard, like myself, and indeed Gunnar, who's here, and a few other people, is an AIMC with a Silver Star at the Magic Circle, 4 times to lecture at the Magic Circle. I think that's some kind of a record. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's get to the main event, as they say in all good wrestling circles. Please welcome the astonishing and remarkable Mr. Howard Hamburg.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Not at all. Nice to see you, Howard. Thank you so much. I know you and I were busy juggling schedules, but we finally got a date hunkered down, and here we are. Wonderful, wonderful to see you. I hope some of those pics brought back memories, and I'm going to let you really choose whichever one you want to talk about. But before you do, I'm not going to ask you the inevitable question of how did you get started in magic? I think that is so passe. But I understand from my research, you were just a young kid. You weren't quite hustling in a pool hall, but that's, I guess, where it all started. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually, when I was 12 years old, I got a job on Friday nights and all day Saturday and Sunday, working in a pool hall in Rochester, New York. I'll just give you just a brief background. I was born in 1939, so I'll let you all do the math. And when I was working in this pool hall, I put the cues in the racks, and I used to put the chalk on the table, and I would bring drinks and sandwiches to the players. I used to get a quarter an hour, 25 cents an hour. And in 1951, for a 12-year-old, that was a lot of money. And there was a security guard towards the end of the pool hall, and he sat at this door. And what was behind the door was two tables and two dealers. And it was basically a bust-out joint. That's what we used to call them, a bust-out joint. You went in with money, you came out busted. And in those days, they didn't call them bottom dealers. In those days, they call them subway dealers, because the subway is underneath, which is an interesting play on words. And one night, I was interested in that. I used to bring things into the room for sandwiches and so forth. And but I knew something was going on, even though I was 12 years old. I understood this. And I asked one of the dealers one day, he was just cleaning up and ready to leave. I said, can you show me how to, I didn't even say shuffle, mix cards so that they stay in the same order? And can you show me how you can make a cut? And nothing happens. So he taught me a false shuffle and a false cut. Segue, when I was 16, I was at a magic shop in Rochester, only because I just curious to see what it was. And I read a few little books on magic, but I wasn't into magic. And there was a 14-year-old youngster there who did such incredible magic. And not all with cards, ball and vase and so forth. And I taught him that false shuffle and that false cut. And he used it to the day he unfortunately died, a young man. And he said to me, he said, Howard, he said, one day I'm going to be one of the best magicians in the world. And it came to fruition. His name was Michael Skinner. So I just wanted to share that story with you.
Well, thank you. I think this is an appropriate point because I wanted to start with you, but I think there are some gentlemen here that I would like to acknowledge and ask them if they would kindly say just very few words of welcome to you and to everybody. I want to start with the Dean of our International Assembly, Dr. Joel Batman Zawitsky.
Oh, I'm looking forward to all these great stories. I got my tea with a little bit of honey added to it. So I'm just going to sit back and relax and listen to you, Howard. I can go for hours here. So
I like your bottle of honey. Let's go to almost your neck of the woods, just around the corner from you. Well, as the crow flies, the Dean of the Society of American Magicians, the Right Honorable Mr. George Schindler.
Hello, Howard. I see him every week on Fridays. We have a luncheon on Zoom. So I'll see you again. Can't wait to see you work.
Oh, thanks, George.
And then just jump real quickly to the current president of the Society of American Magicians, Mr. Tom Gentile.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been so fortunate over the last 2 years to be in several different Zooms with this man in the room. It's never fails to disappoint, never fails to show off, never fails to just come up with something that you've never seen before or stories you've never heard before. Welcome, 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 Howard. And Anthony, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom.
And last but not least, a gentleman who will be taking over the presidency in July, the current president-elect, all the way from Canada, Mr. Rod Chow.
Thank you, Anthony. Wow, what a pleasure to see everyone here from all parts of the world. Such an amazing turnout, of course, for Howard Hamburg, the legend. So great to see you, Howard, and thank you for coming on to the Anthony Darkstone Dossiers.
Thank you so much, Rod. I appreciate it.
Now, I think we're just going to swing back to you, Howard, in no particular order. We ran some stills, and I would just love for you to share some of your stories. One of them, I think, was where you had the grand attendance of one person show up while you were on stage, yes?
Oh, yeah, that was a little story that actually happened in Cherry Hills, New Jersey, at a convention. And it was, I had mentioned to the organizer on Saturday, since activities didn't start till 11, I'd be willing to sit down maybe from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock or 9 to 10:30 with some of the younger magicians and just share maybe some of my ideas for them just to think about. I never told anybody this is the gospel truth. You just take it for what it's worth, and if you want to use it, use it. And what they didn't do is they failed, accidentally, of course, but they failed to make an announcement of this. And only one young man showed up with his father, and I had been put on the stage with a micro headset, and they had sound checks and everything else. They expected a lot of the kids to come, but they didn't know about it. But this one youngster, he's around 10 years old, 11 years old, he showed up with his father. And they said, "Oh, we're sorry," and they started to leave after the organizer had, one of the organizing people explained to him there was an error made and so forth. And I said, "No." I said, "Take the table from the stage and put it on the floor and put some chairs around it. And I'm going to do this for this young man. He showed up for it. I'm not going to let him walk out of here." And I did an hour and a half with him. It was just great. I still get letters from this youngster. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I kind of pushed you into telling that story. Really pushed you into it, because I want everybody watching and attending here today to understand that this man is not just a legend with a deck of cards. I wanted him to tell something about his vast life and experience that shows who he is as a human being. And I think that's where the real magic lies, in sharing and giving. Let me take you to your times at the castle and simply say the floor is yours. Regale us, please, with stories, histories, and I'm sure many, many things a lot of us don't know. I want these to be documented for the future. So some young fella of 10, 12, 14, or whatever age can hopefully look at this on the showcase and kind of go, "Oh, that's who he was. That's what he did." And I've told people this is not a lecture. This is sharing magic history from, as Kenton Kepper told me earlier today, and a few other people, he's going to be called a living legend, but that's what he is. So, this is Gary Plans, Kenton, all these guys kind of, myself. Yeah, you are a living legend. So tell us of some of your legendary exploits at the castle.
Well, I'm the luckiest guy in the world when it comes to this, as far as magic is concerned, because, I'll lead to it. I was in 1970. I walked into a magic shop in Hollywood, Hollywood Magic, and I met a fellow by the name of Ray Grismer. Ray Grismer was a school teacher who played jazz piano, but he told me that he was teaching he had a piano student who in return was teaching him magic. He said, "Would you like to meet him?" Now, I had been to the Magic Castle in 1964. One of my closest friends, 53 years, Tony Giorgio, took me there. And Tony was one of the best card muckers or dice men I've ever met in my life. But he took me there, and I was introduced to Charlie Miller. But in 1970, I walked into the Magic Castle with Ray, and Ray said, "Howard, my piano student, Di Vernon." Well, I knew the name because I had read a couple books, and his name was prominent in all these books. We sat down, and I was so lucky, honestly, so lucky that he took me in as a friend. We started talking about magic, and I told him I really wasn't into magic that much. And we talked about the other subject a little. And he said, "Look, on Monday, I think it was on a Friday we walked in. On Monday, he says, you can go before a committee here at the Magic Castle, and they'll ask you some questions, and you'll show them some magic, and you become a magician member." I said, "Well, I can only do Triumph. That was the only magic effect I could do." And he says, "Just get a couple books over the weekend and you'll be fine." He says, "In fact, write a bunch of books. Ray will give you the names of a bunch of books. He says, I'll ask you what you've read." So I had a slip on my hand, and but that Monday came and went down into this room in which it was very dark except for the light on the table. And there were 5 fellows there with their little name tags, membership committee. And maybe because of the questions they were asking me, maybe I was a little nervous, and I was shuffling the cards and cutting them while they were asking me questions. "When's the first time you saw a magic trick?" "Well, my uncle took a nickel from my ear." "What books have you read?" And I looked down at the list. I started reading them off. Oh, I had read Erdnase backwards and forwards many, many times. And one of the fellows said, "Look, we don't want to see you just sitting there shuffling and cutting cards as you've been doing. Why, show us something." And I said, "Well, I already have." And I knew I shouldn't have said that, but I said, "I already have." And there was pure quiet in the room. And they said, "What do you mean?" And I turned the deck up and spread it face up, and it was a new deck order. And I had been shuffling and cutting and shuffling and cutting. Now, this is so
Wow.
the truth's true. In the back of the room in the dark was Charlie Miller and Di Vernon. I didn't know they were on that committee, but they were in the dark. And Di said, quote, "Do we need to see anything more, boys?" That's all you heard from the back of the room. So I got in the Magic Castle. I never did a card trick. So, but talking about the opportunity of being with likes of Charlie Miller and Francis Carlisle and Jimmy Grippo and of course the professor Michael Skinner all my life, and J.C. Wagner and Jerry Anderson, just goes on and on and on. It was a blessing to me. And for some reason, they all took a liking to me, which I appreciate even to this day. I must say that the professor was the biggest troublemaker at the Magic Castle. I was number 2. Larry Jennings would come up to the professor and he'd say, "Professor, I got this new shift I'd like to show you." And I'm sitting down in the Vernon corner, and I can see everything. And he did this shift. I couldn't see anything, nothing. It was just like he was holding the deck in his hands. And Di would look at him and said, "You know, Bruce Servan showed me that last week with one less move." You know, he pitted Bruce Servan against Jennings and Jennings against Bruce. But since I mentioned Larry Jennings, I want to share a little story with you guys. Sitting at the table in the Vernon corner, and we used to put a deck of cards in the middle of the table. And if one of us decided to do something, we would. If not, we would talk for 3.5 hours about magic. And sitting at the table was Charlie Miller, myself, Michael Skinner, the professor, Larry Jennings. And there were some women behind the professor waiting in line to go into the close-up room. And the professor said, "Howar." He always called me Howar, Howar. He never called me Howard for 22 years. Howar. because his joke was, how are you? That no one else could call me that. That's what the professor always called me. How are you? He said, would you mind doing something for my lady friends? And I said, my pleasure. And I had one of them select a card, and the next person select a card. And I said to the first person, I said, what was the name of your card? And she said, the whatever it was. And I reached into my coat pocket and I removed, let me see if I can just get this. I removed the card that she selected. And I asked the other lady, what was the name of your card? And she gave it to me. And I said, don't take your eyes off the deck. She says, I won't. And she gave me the name of the card, and I picked up, and the only thing in my hand was the card, and the deck was gone. Well, they were astonished, and the professor thanked me, and Charlie nodded. Now, Larry Jennings and I were very good friends, but Larry was a very poor drinker. A lot of people thought he would just drink, but he had diabetes. At a young age, he had a lot of medical issues. But he was sitting there and he said, that was the worst thing I ever saw. You should have done a top cover pass. Well, Charlie Miller said, well, Howard's a friend of ours. You don't embarrass him like that. I mean, if you have something constructive, show him, but don't embarrass him in front of all of us. He says, I'll show him. But Larry had some drinks. So Larry gets up, he's 3 feet away from the table with his back to us. He's doing the same effect for these ladies, going to show me. Well, like I told you, the professor was an extremely, he used to like to pit people, and he was a jokester. And he said, are you using the old bicycle fan backs? He says, so is Larry. I'm sure you feel terrible of what he just did to you. Maybe you can think of something. And I thought for less than a second, and I stood up behind Larry Jennings. Now his back was to us. I was 2 feet behind him. He was up here. I was back here. When he went to his pocket with the deck, I took my deck and I threw it between his legs, and there's cards all over the floor in front of him. And Larry sees this. He thinks he missed his pocket because the timing was just there. He reached into his pocket, and all of a sudden he sees cards all over the floor. And he walks over the deck and he goes upstairs. I don't need this. And he leaves. I start to sit down. Vernon's laughing, and he's got a twinkle in his eye, actually, and Charlie's sort of chuckling. And Vernon says to me, he says, I wouldn't sit down. He says, I'd go home if I were you. And he says, because Larry's going to be very, very upset when he finds the deck in his pocket. So things like that went on all the time. Another story was this same basic group, but Johnny Thompson was sitting there. And I had just had a lady select a card, and it went back into the deck, and I am holding the deck like so in my hand. And I hear a page. They used to page in those days, overhead page. Telephone call, line 2, Howard Hamburg. And it was Jim Patton's voice. Jim was a great, great magician, a great guy. And he often worked behind the main bar as a bartender. That's the only place that you could actually see the Vernon table from, is the main bar. So I think he's just playing around because he knows I'm in the middle of an effect. We would do these things to each other. So I look over there, I don't see him. 5 seconds later, second call, Howard Hamburg, line 2, please. Now this story that I'm telling you happened to be one of Johnny Thompson's favorite stories. He always told it when there was people around him. And so I don't see him again. And I looked over to the professor, and he just shrugged his shoulders. I stood up, so help me. And as I passed away from the table. I handed the deck to Johnny Thompson. I said, hold the brake till I get back. And he did. And I took the call. I came back, picked up the brake, finished the trip. All those things went on. Those are just, I mean, absolute great days. You talk about Charlie Miller. I'll show you a couple of things Charlie did that was just wonderful.
Yes, please.
Charlie would be sitting at the table, and well, two things he did. And he always told Ray Grismer and I, if you ever laugh, I'll never do it again. And every time he came to that point, because he knew we were sitting there, I would bite my lips so hard I'd like draw blood. And Ray was trying not to we didn't want to be the ones to stop this. So Charlie would have someone select a card and they would go back. And this was the story he would tell, just exactly like this. He said, most of you, like myself, have seen magicians in the past. Magic has changed over the years. In the old days, and I don't know whether you've seen it, I'm sure you have, because I have, many magicians, not most of them, but many of them, for some reason would take the deck under the table. He says, and I don't do that. And he would finish his effect. Well, he just did the pass right here. He said most of them would take, someone would take the cards under the table. He did the pass. That's brilliant. The other thing he did, which was great, for a deck switch, he'd have the deck in the crook of his left knee. That's the deck that's the cold deck he's gonna bring in. And he give the impression to the audience that he was not comfortable at the table. He would say, he'd go like this, here, would you select a card? Little grunts that he wasn't comfortable. He did this until he felt the audience realized, he could sense it, he could see it. They felt uneasy, that he wasn't comfortable. And then during the process, he'd move around in his chair because he just discovered he's too far away from the table. And he'd move his chair up, and there's the deck switch right there. Because you wouldn't move your chair if you're holding the deck with one hand. You'd go off center. You couldn't do that. And so he says he'd show emotions that he wasn't comfortable, and he just moved up there's the deck switch, come back up, and you could see a sign of relief from the audience. I'm glad he feels more comfortable now. But that was Charlie. Go ahead.
And of course, he was very famous, as many of the older folks will know, and those who study history, for his holdout and things like that.
Yeah, well, there's something else that's interesting. Hugard had an expert at the expert card technique. A lot of people don't realize it, but close to 50% of that book was from Charlie Miller.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And
there's a lot of people here who didn't either.
And Hugard had asked Charlie, could he get the professor to contribute something? And evidently, according to what I heard from Charlie, was that Hugard, he did, but Hugard didn't credit Vernon. He didn't give him any credit for it. And Charlie said, that's it. But yeah, a lot of the percentage of expert card technique was Charlie Miller's.
Well, I told all you folk attending, you're going to learn stuff from history.
In Vernon's Cups and Balls, when he had the three stacked and he placed a ball and apparently onto the thing, but he retained it, and now it picks up the two cups and it's on the third cup. And then he puts them down. Now this one's retained, and now there's two, then there's three. That was Charlie Miller's. Charlie was the one that developed that part of Cups and Balls.
So you spent a lot of time with a lot of these guys, and you say you knew Charlie run a picture of him earlier on, a black and white one. And I think when we were chatting earlier, as I do researching for the show and looking for stills and all the things that producers do, you mentioned a funny story to me, and if I recall it correctly, it involved Coulda Bucks, and you were all leaving the castle and going somewhere, but
Oh my
Coulda
gosh.
Bucks was a vegetarian. Yeah, tell
Well-
that one. I think it's absolutely hilarious.
Well, we had a group of guys that played the game of hearts. And at the time, the Magic Castle, the library was on the third floor. Now, those four people that played hearts for about 15 years was Di Vernon, myself, Ray Grismer, and Coulda Bucks. We always played hearts. And, God help the magician coming into the library to get a book because it was off limits. We were playing hearts. And one night we're going to go, I was with the professor, we're waiting for Ray. Ray was in the men's room and we were outside. It had rained at the Magic Castle. And it wasn't raining, but the driveway was wet. And for those that haven't been there, it's a very steep type of driveway. And the professor had me select a card, and Ray walked out, and I showed Ray the card. And it went back into the deck, and the professor, we're going to go over to the professor's condo, and Coulda Bucks was going to meet us there, and we were just going to play hearts there. And the professor's holding up the deck. He says, give me a number between 5 and 20. And I said, 12. And he says, what? And he's running the here to get a count and picks up the break and makes a shift. And as we're starting to walk down the driveway, Ray was on his left, I was on his right. The professor's counting verbally. He's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're walking 5, 6. On 7, he slips. He slips on the wet driveway. Ray grabbed his left arm. I missed his right arm, and the professor landed on his back. He was 82. And I'm yelling to the valet attendants, we need help over here. Please help us. And the professor looked up at me. He says, damn it, just pick me up. Just pick me up. And I said, Professor, you could have a broken bone. I don't want to take that chance. He says, oh, he's getting very upset. So Ray took his left arm. I took his right. I wouldn't look. I was afraid there was going to be something. We lifted him up, and he wiped off his hands and his jacket. He says, the light's green. The light's green. Let's go. And I swear to you, this is what we heard. He took one step forward, and we heard 8, 9, 10. He was gonna finish this trickery.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't.
Oh, there were so many wonderful things that happened in those days. And listen, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but we'll try this. Up in the library was Larry Jennings, myself, Ray Grismer, Charlie Miller, Senator Crandall, and the professor were sitting around the big card table. And the Larry says to Senator Crandall, would you do your dice stacking routine for us? Senator Crandall had a beautiful dice stacking routine. It was just great. So he gets up and opens up one of the locked drawers and takes out his cup and some dice. And we remove the felt cover that's on the wooden table. We took this off. And this is what happened. He started this way, stopped, and you heard that.
Yep, we did.
And Senator Crandall was extremely embarrassed. And Larry reached over and knocked over the cup and the dice because he said, oh, there's some little wetness on the table. And Larry got a little paper towel and wiped it off. Well, what we didn't know, Larry had a die in his hand and he's sitting across the table. So when he stopped with the stacking, he just dropped it on the table. And it sounded exactly like a die falling off the stack. Yeah, we would do stuff like this all the time. You know, I mentioned, I hope I'm not going over you here, but we mentioned something about Vernon and Triumph. I'd like to share with the group something.
Sure, go ahead.
Effect, which I will be more than happy to show you. You know, in Triumph, a person would select a card and you would have to pass it or some way to get to the top, because as everyone knows, you're going to face up, face down, and so forth. And I myself wanted to find a way of doing it without having, once the card is here, it's done. In other words, there's no pass, there's no nothing. In fact, actually have the person card goes in and it goes right into the deck. That's all I wanted out of it. I didn't want to have any of this sort of stuff having to happen. And I showed it to the professor, I think it was in 71. And Charlie Miller was working at the castle at that time. And he called Charlie over and said, look at how Art came up with. And Charlie, a lot of you know, was a very, very close friend of Johnny Thompson. And he showed Johnny. And Johnny, before he passed away, came out with a marvelous book. And he mentions it. He said, do you mind if I put it in the book? I said, just putting my name in your book associated with your name is good enough for me. So I'll share this with you. Person selects a card. Here it is. And I ask, about where in the deck is that card going? And your answer is
The middle.
Halfway.
Yeah, middle. Yeah.
It's going to go in the middle. But it's going to go in the middle on an angle. Like this. It's done. It's here. Now, I square the deck up here, but I like to square this up also. But this point is sticking out here from here. And if I square this, I'm going to knock it in and disturb this jog. So I still can do it without disturbing it. Why? Because these three fingers are away from the deck. If you take the deck away, you'll see they're actually away from the deck. But when they see this and see this, they feel it's squared. But these fingers aren't even touching this. Now the cards are put down. My right hand's covering everything. And I spread the cards and say, look, we know, I just spread the cards. And if you'll notice, all the cards are in the same direction. They're all sitting the same way, except this one. All of them are in the same position, except that one that we jogged. So as soon as I spread them, I do this, just maybe to disturb the look, but I've not been questioned on it. Since I spread from left to right, I pick up the cards with my left hand, and my thumb locks down on that card as I use the entire packet to flip this one face up. And now we're doing Triumph. So there's no wasted move. It's just the card goes in the middle of the deck. You know, say it's somewhere in here, and you're ready to do Triumph. The other thing too, which just showed the brilliancy of the professor. You know this part where they push these in and strip them out, and cards are face up, face down, back to back. Well, he did say that for in his instructions for the effect, but he actually didn't do it that way. The right forefinger was curved just enough, and it stayed right on the white border of their card. I believe it was the 10 of hearts. 10 of hearts. It rested here, and it has one responsibility, and that's that. That's it, nothing more. This is all it does. It's going to go straight because you've got 3 fingers on this side of the deck and one and your thumb over here, so it can't go off balance. That's all it does. This hand does this. It doesn't even have to touch the back of the deck. You'll see why in a moment, but it does this. If you put this together with this, watch what you get. It looks like the deck is being pushed in, not that whack type of move, and nothing happens.
Wow.
So all that's happening is this is going like this, but with the motion of this hand, it looks like it's going in. And then you would strip out here, complete the cut, face up, face down, back to back, and so forth. So I just wanted to share that with you, that little piece of business that Vernon did. And long as we're discussing pieces of business, and I've got the cards here, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Please go for it.
In Vernon's twisting the aces, his instructions were to do the Elmsley from the fingertips. In other words, this is how he taught it. And I asked him, and I've seen many fine magicians, they twist, they come here because he says to do it this way. I've seen some of the fine magicians in the world, doing this twist and doing what he told them to do. But something bothered me about this because I was with him for so long. I knew he just did a conventional Elmsley count. And I said, why do you do it at the fingertips? He said, I want you to think about it. He never, very rarely gave answers. He made you think more. Finally, after 2 weeks, I come back and I said, I've been thinking it on and off. I honestly, Professor, I can't figure it out why. What he did was he took his middle finger and thumb and he put it here. So when he did the twist, he didn't have to move his hands to do the Elmsley. Because all guys were doing this and coming back, or doing this and coming back. And he didn't like that, so he did it from here. And now he's doing why he did it from the fingertips. So I thought I would just share that.
Wonderful. The subtlety of the moves, I think it was best described by a phrase I sort of conjured up via his god now, Steve Daiquiri, hiding the skill within the art. So
it's very, very true. One of Vernon's favorite expressions was that it's not the effect, it's the journey to it. And he also was very known for saying, many magicians don't get it. They stop thinking too early. And that's where the next part everyone thinks is a singular quote of his, but it came with the quote I just gave you. Confusion is not magic.
right.
Because he would always say great magic is simple and simple magic is great. No, that's where he said it. Great magic is simple, simple magic is great. Confusion is not magic. And why do we, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody, I was guilty of it. Why do we, I guess that expression, run when we're not being chased? Why do we do things that we do that's not necessary? And I've come to a conclusion that it's our ego says we can. And because of that, we do it. And sometimes one of the pieces of my philosophy is, and I tell this to all young magicians especially, take it for what it's worth. Stop thinking like a magician and start thinking like a spectator, and your magic will be 100% improved. Just try it. Start thinking along their lines, not your lines. Put the same emotion into what you're doing that you expect them to give to you. And just try it. Just try it. I'm not saying it's the gospel truth, but
It's pretty close because I've said this before, and I believe it may have been on one of the Darkstone dossiers. It's all very well for an actor to go up to Lee Strasberg, study acting in New York, method, whatever. But it always struck me, just merely an example to amplify somewhat, not greatly, but somewhat, on what you just said. When someone asked Kirk Douglas about this, his response was, look, it's not my job to convince myself I am Spartacus. It's my job to convince the audience I'm Spartacus.
well, there's that expression. It's perfectly apropos for what you just said.
Yeah. And I think, in a performance art, as we do, and to a greater or lesser extent, I guess, we sort of lose it as we get older, but there is, whether we want it or not, a certain amount of ego that creeps in, because it's kind of like, hey, look what I can do. Almost like, hey, I can juggle 15 clubs as opposed to just 6. And as you rightly said, Howard, if you're thinking like the audience, they're giving you their time and their money. So the object is, there's a gentleman sitting here of great noteworthiness. I can tell you who he is. He won't mind. He showed me his passport. Do you know what it says on it? It says entertainer. It doesn't say magician or anything like that. It says entertainer. I can see him. He's smiling. I was his house guest in New York. And that stuck with me because people go, yeah, you're an entertainer, and so is what. No, it's a performance art. There are people out there that are giving you their time, and you're taking their money. Keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated for them to think it through. Your job is to show them something. And as John Rockefeller once said to me, our job is to make people love to a certain degree what we love. And the only way you can do that is gently. You can't throw it at them. You have to woo them with it. Yeah.
All of us have something in common, all of us here tonight. And that's the love that we have for this art that we refer to as magic. And I strongly believe that subtleties and technique and subtleties are so important. Do you mind if I share a story with the group?
Not in the slightest, Howard. That's why you're here. Please.
Some of them have heard it, but it turned my thinking of magic 180 degrees when this happened to me. It was one night at the Magic Castle, and sitting there was Larry Jennings, myself, Ray Grismer, and the professor, and Charlie. Charlie used to like to sit there with the professor. And Larry said to the professor, some of you guys have heard this, but for those that haven't, I want to share this with you. What's more important, the beginning, the middle, or the end? And the professor thought maybe for a couple seconds. And he said, you can't have a strong ending without a strong middle. And you can't have a strong middle without a strong beginning. I remember these words. It's hard to believe, but the professor has been gone for 30 years. Can you believe that? He died in 1992, which just came to me. He said, the beginning is the foundation of the effect. The middle is the framework. And the end is the finished effect itself. He said, however, if all three of those elements combined were done flawlessly, there's something more important than those three elements. Now I moved my chair up. And I actually saw Larry move his chair up. So we're going to hear something here. He said, always remember this. It's the moment That's what they take home with them. That's what they talk about to their friends. Not the beginning, the middle, or the end, but the moment. He took his glass of Johnny Walker Black and his cigar in the other hand. He held up the glass and he said, Max Malini taught me that. That turned my thinking of magic just like that. Segue. 6.5 to 7 months later, I'm out with dinner with the professor and Jimmy Grippo. And I said to Jimmy, you don't do card to wallet, but you do card to sealed envelope. I'm just curious to why. He said, Howard, let's say that the host of the close-up room was now going to announce the scheduled performer. But he tells the audience, we have a special little thing for all of you, a little bonus. We have a gentleman before the scheduled performer comes out who is going to do a card effect for you. Put your hands together, blah, blah, blah. And the guy comes out and he does card to wallet the way we have seen it done many, many times. Signing of it, the pen into his pocket. You know the routine. He said, Howard, what we're going to do is we're going to go outside the exit door and we're going to ask everybody as they come out, what did you see? And he says, I will be willing to bet you that 99.9% of them will say the same thing. The magician spread the cards face down and I had a free choice of a card. He handed me a pen and I signed the face of the card and showed everyone behind me the card. It went back into the deck. The magician shuffled, spread them, cast a shadow over them, and turned them face up, and my card was gone. And the magician reached into his coat pocket and took out an envelope, which I tore open myself, not him. I did it. And you're not going to believe it, but inside, I removed my signed card. And not one of those people mentioned the wallet. The moment is tearing that envelope open and removing they tear the envelope and removing their card. That's what they talk about to their friends. No, they don't say, as Jimmy said, they don't say, he reached in his pocket and took out this weird thing. I've never seen a wallet like that. And then with a zipper, and then he took out an envelope and it had wax on it. No. It was superfluous to him. Am I against card to wallet? Absolutely not. I love card to wallet, but I understood Jimmy. And what's really interesting about the story is Jimmy drank Chablis. That's all he drank. And he took his glass of Chablis and he put it up like this and he said, Di Vernon taught me that. So it was interesting to go from Max Malini teaching Vernon, but now he's acknowledging that he learned that from the professor.
And here you are sharing that wonderful piece of history, but it's empirical knowledge and hopefully causing many of our folks watching here to stop and reflect just a little bit on how they present their magic. Hopefully, that's what it's done.
My words are not gospel, they're not in stone, but they're from many, many years of not me coming up with it, but giving the right information by the likes of Di Vernon and Charlie Miller and all the rest of the wonderful, wonderful magicians at that time that I was so blessed to be accepted as a friend. There isn't a day that if I take cards out, I automatically see them. By the way, the picture you showed with the black beard and Vernon next to me, was asleep in that picture. Vernon used to fall asleep on the spot.
So I've heard.
And so I saw him sitting there asleep and I sat next to him and I had a friend take a picture. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So somebody who should be nameless, in fact, apparently went downstairs and he was asleep on the couch and went, oops, disturbing and walk out. And apparently just, this is what I've been told. I don't know if it's true, but it's a great story. Opened one eye and then said something to that person. And that particular person, it's actually a member of our International Assembly, changed their whole perspective to just one sentence with one eye open. Now, remarkable man. Now, I know we could probably, well, I could, I don't know about anybody else, but I could sit here for the next 4, 5, 6, 10 hours and just absolutely just listen and listen and listen and listen. And I think it's just wonderful. But I think what I need to do at this stage, in fact, is ask my tech Zoom captain to free the mics and chat, because I am pretty certain, and I'll put money on it, there's a few people out there wanted to speak directly with you or ask you something in the chat or switch on their mics and say something to you. So
I just want to say thank you both to Howard. This was absolute pearls of wisdom. Were just amazing. And I can't wait to watch this again on the replay because it's just phenomenal what you taught today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
well, they're all true. Oh, just very quickly, I'm very glad, Joel.
I wish we had an extra 3 hours here, though.
I'd love it. Absolutely. Personally, yeah, I'd love it. Joel mentioned that lovely word replay. What happens is Joel puts it on a special showcase, which stays there. So anyone who wants to go back and goes, oh, I missed that part, or I missed the show, damn it, I really wanted to hear what Howard had to say, it'll be there. And I just want to quickly add, the International Assembly has put out in January, its very first Magic News Network, and Michael Leike is our newscaster. And the February one will be out, I think probably Monday, Tuesday, something like that. Yeah, it'll be out. So please look out for that. Quick thanks to Brett, Michael, and Peter for manning the gallery and making sure we...
Anthony, it's Rod Chow.
Yes, Rod.
Yes, I want to thank you for being such an excellent host again and to invite Howard onto your program.
Thank you. Thank you.
Howard, it was so great to hear from you again. And I love the way that you always tell these stories and you're always able to weave in a card trick here and there. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you very much.
Rod, I got to tell you, it was really hard work to convince Howard not to actually, perform or give away something. Because I said to him, no, it's not a lecture. Don't do that. Because Howard, he'd want to do something and share it. And I said, no, we may have lay people. And there's also another reason for that, because down the line, there's a number of things as the International Assembly are doing, especially as we're now really welcoming the world. We're going to bring Howard back to actually do a little spot lecture for us. Yeah. Rod, do you want to just very, very quickly, while we have people here, not everybody knows about it, you're going to be president in July and you have a very cool motto for your presidency.
Yes, just building on the past two presidents' themes of we are the energy, we do more together. Our new theme for 2022 to 2003, starting in July when we're going to be at the FISM in Quebec City. It's going to be we welcome the world.
Well, we love the art, we love the passion, and that's why we do. Does anybody else want to jump in real quick? Because I've got a couple of things I want to share with you, but I
would like to just say hi to Howard. And you know what? Every time this fellow speaks, I feel honored every time he joins in the Miami Magicians group, even though I'm from Canada. He always gives us an education. He always shares stories.
Thank you so much, Keith. So, yeah, anybody else want to jump in, please? Go ahead.
Hey, Howard. It's
How you doing, Bill?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
All right. Thank you.
It's been a while since I've seen you. Tony, it's good to see you too, my friend.
I know. I was just about to jump in after you'd finished and gone, my God, Frank, what the hell is it you drinking? I want some. You look great. Listen, make a note of this gentleman's name. It's Frank Zach. And when I post about him coming on the Darkstone Dossiers, you'd be really, really silly if you missed it. Hey, listen, we got a couple of hands up that I can see anyway. One is our most illustrious, and then Mr. Lawrence Seymour.
I just like to build on what Keith said earlier. No matter when you see Howard, how many times you see Howard, no matter when you see Howard, he's always on. He's always got interesting stories. He's not a one of those old guys that keeps repeating a story. They're all new, they're all fresh, they're all unique, and it's so great to get a slice of life out of the Magic Castle's walls with the professor. Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Dixon here, Craig Dixon. My God, I haven't seen you for forever. How are you, sir?
It's just so good to see you, Tony. And Howard, don't forget our dinner when 4F reconvenes. I know Quentin is, but it's so good to see you, my friend. Really, really is. And I always enjoy listening to you.
Oh, Mr. Lawrence Seymour, sir, you had your hand up a while.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to thank Howard very much because in one of our past national meetings online there, after I'd done a 4-ace trick, he gave me a very nice compliment, and then he shared some 4-ace moves with us.
Well, thank you very much. Tommy, did I see you had your hand up at one stage?
Yes, I put it back up. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Howard, and you've been my friend for a very short time, but I feel like I've known you for my whole life, and I just want to thank you for your friendship.
Absolutely, Tommy. It's a pleasure to meet you, my friend. Well, there's a few points that I wanted to share. Magician friends from all over the world know that I don't do magic as a vocation. And many of them do ask me, what do I get out of magic? And I respond the same way to all of them. And I've done lectures in over 23 countries now. And my answer is memories and friendships. And before I forget, tonight, I want to thank all of you for being part of my memories and my friendships. There is a goal that I have set forth in magic, and I say it to every lecture I do, and that is to assure that the younger generation of magicians never forget about standing on the shoulders of the giants of magic who gave them the tools they use today. I think it's almost a responsibility of all of us to keep the history of magic alive. I know you're going to have some 10, 12, 13-year-old come up to you and say, who's this DAI Vernon guy? Who's this Tony Slidini? They forget. They just are into doing. They don't even look at the explanations. They don't even look at the performance of a magician. Many of them don't. They go right to the explanation, and then 2 minutes later, they think they're doing magic. So I needed to say that because that was very, very important. That I think we should just remind the youngster it's not just a trick. There's more to magic than that.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, at the top of the show, I said I had a little surprise thing, mainly kind of for SAM folks, and in particular, International Assembly folks. Lee Alex designed, okay, just hold it up for just a second, Tom. This is a pocket square that you fold and put in your pocket, but it also happens to be a devil's hank, which was done very exclusively for the Magic Circle. Lee and I got talking, and I said to him, how about if you design one for the SAM International Assembly? Well, he has designed one. I looked at it, I loved it, we made some changes, and I said, me being me, went, how about if it's not just a devil's hank, but it does something else? And he went, wow, I love that. So we've incorporated that as well. The other thing I want to tell you is, I'm pretty much certain, like me, pretty much everybody in this room is a fan of Bond in one form or another. Joel, I think we want to bring you full screen. You're holding a deck. Okay.
That's not the deck you'll see in 2 weeks, though. But
no, it isn't. Yeah. Okay. I have a prop from Russia with Love. I'm not going to show it to you. I'll show it to you on the show. Because on the 19th, I have the world's leading expert on James Bond, anything to do with Bond. The man should be cast as Bond. He has the most magnificent collection of Bond items and props from movies. And amongst his collection, he's even got an Aston Martin. I just thought I'd throw that in, yeah? Why am I having him on the Darkstone Dossiers on the 19th? We've been going back and forth on this since October of last year, and we finally nailed down a date. Because we're going to talk about the crossover between Q, the props in Bond movies, the relationship to magic, the illusion of Bond and the illusion of magic. We've got some amazing clips lined up for you, even an interview with Daniel Craig. We're also going to have a 2-minute with members of the International Assembly doing magic as Bond villains. So that's what's going to be on the show as well. You really do not want to miss this. I promise you. You're going to get the surprise of your life when you find out who this amazing Bond expert is. Let's go back to Howard if he wants to say something.
I do want to just basically explain the Howard situation. It's a very it's a very emotional story with me. I can't help what they're doing to my roof. Anyhow, many years ago, I had come home and my late wife, Barbara, said, let's go out to dinner for your birthday. And I said, nah, we'll get food to go or something. And, but like a good wife, you're in the car, make a left, make a right, and stopped at a restaurant, and walked down this hallway to this receptionist who took us to double doors. And they opened up the doors and there was Charlie Miller and Di Vernon, Michael Skinner and Tony Giorgio and all my friends. There were about 70 people. My wife had prepared a surprise birthday party. And the professor came up to me about 8:30 and he gave me a card. It says, thank you for the memories, which is where I get the memories and the friendships from. That was my birthday card that Vernon gave me for my birthday. At 11 o'clock or so, he approached my wife and I, and he said, here's a special card for you. He says, I don't want you to open it here, and I don't want you to open it in the parking lot, but only at home. And he asked my wife, he said, make sure that he does that. And she said, I will, Professor. I get home, I thank my wife for the card. And she said, oh, the professor gave you another card. And I removed from my inside pocket, and it said, again, thank you for your friendship. So now you know where I get the friendships and memories from, because it means so much. And it was a nice card. I opened it up, and in it was a sealed envelope. And I held it up to the light, and I shook it. There was something in it. It was a coin envelope, and I poured onto my hand the letter D. For 22 years, he called me Howard, and he gave me that D for my birthday. And I went back to the castle a couple nights later. We never talked about it. There was no reason to. Eventually, he took sick, and he was taken down to San Diego for his son Bob to watch over him. And I received a phone call from his doctor explaining during the week that he wasn't doing well and he was on morphine and so forth. And I said, is there a way I could talk to him? And I said, yes. And he said, it's your friend Howard on the phone. He said, oh, Howard. And he took the phone, and we only spoke for a few minutes because I knew he just wasn't doing well. And I said, I love you, Professor. And he said, I love you too, Howard. And 4 days later, I get a phone call from his doctor that he had passed away. So the only reason I didn't show my face is telling the stories that I get very emotional when I tell the story. But now you know where the D notes come from is because of that. All those years, he just called me Howard. And you talk about the Vernon touch.
Yeah, with a D afterwards on your birthday. I've got a lovely message from Dear John O'Riordan, MIMC with Gold Star, member of our assembly from Ireland, who lives in England. It says, thank you, Anthony, for an evening. Such a pleasure to listen to Howard's stories. I think we've kind of really run over some time here. It's been enjoyable. So, Jennifer Graham, wow, great to see you. You're here. Thank you. Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Always enjoyed listening to Howard. Thank you, Anthony, for another wonderful Dossiers. Wonderful. Thank you for coming, Jennifer. A huge thanks from me, of course, to Howard. So can I leave you with the end words? Howard with a D.
Very, very. I wish everybody a healthy and happy up and coming year, and I hope seriously that I have an opportunity of meeting all of you in person again, or for the first time sometime in the near future. Thank you for this opportunity to share a few of my stories of my life.
Huge pleasure and an honor for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody. Take it easy. We'll see you next time on the Darkstone Dossiers.
19th of February. Really. Take it easy, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.